So here at Genius Creators, we have a belief that we are products of our environment. So let me take you on a little journey. Let me ask you a question. So let's say instead of being born and having the life that you've had up until now, let's imagine you were born, but your parents gave you up for adoption as soon as you were born. And let's say you were adopted by a family in a country completely different to the one that you're in. So let's use me as an example. I was born and I was brought up in the UK. So let's say, for example, I was born and I was given to a family in India as an adopted child. How different would my life have been? Well, I would have had a different name. I would have had different beliefs. I would have had a different religion. I would have been surrounded by different kinds of food. I would have been surrounded by a different way of thinking. I would have been surrounded by a completely different attitude towards doing life. For example, in the UK, when somebody dies, we get sad about it. In India, when somebody dies, they throw a party because they believe that this person has passed on to somewhere better. Okay? So I would have been the same person. It would have been the same body. It would have been the same boy, the same baby. But because my environment was different, I would have become a different person. I would have grown up to be somebody else. And so here at Genius Creators, what we do is we begin to ask this question: what would happen if you were to change your environment? See, we have this idea, especially here in the West, that there's a certain way of living. You're born, you get an education, you get a good education, you pass your exams, you get a job, you earn money, you buy a house, you buy a car, you get married, you have children, you retire, and you die. And this is the story that we're sold into. This is our life story, and we are surrounded by people who do the same thing. And here in the West, 99% of the people who live in these countries in the West, all our lives follow this same pattern. We have this certain way of living that's laid out in front of us, and we don't question it. Why don't we question it? Because our parents lived in that way. Their parents lived in that way. The people that surround us all live in this way. So we think, well, this must be the way to live. And we never stop to question for 1 minute if there is a different way of living. And the longer that we live in this way, the more difficult it is to change. Now, what happened to me in 2019, after living my life in this way and realizing that my life was shit, I absolutely hated my life and I was going to take my life. When I came out the other side of that, I began to question this idea of who I was being. How had I managed to get to this place where I hated my life so much? And the more I looked at it, the more I saw that I'd spent my life doing what was expected of me, living my life as a story that somebody else was writing. And I kind of woke up to this idea that I could write a different story. So I began to do things like examine how the human mind works, how my thoughts control my reality. I began to look into things like the law of attraction, how about the way that I am as a person actually influences more what I see in the world than anything else. But there was one thing that I was missing for such a long time, and that was the people that were surrounding me were the ones that were influencing more what happened in my life than anything else. And it wasn't until I had the strength of character to be able to say, I no longer want to be around or be influenced by these people. And I began to associate with different people who were on a different life path to me, that I began to walk a different life. I began to create a new reality for myself, surrounded by new people. So I'm going to put another question to you. Why is it, do you think, that there are people in this world who have massive amounts of abundance in their life? You know, we're talking about the elite people. We're talking about, these people that are the billionaires who have companies and companies and companies. How did they do that? Whereas 99% of the people don't have that. And it's one simple answer. They were brought up in a different way. They were brought up with different rules to live in a different way. And they understand one thing, that what you're able to create comes down to the relationships, your closest relationships in this world, in this life. It depends who you are in relationships with. And we can see this from marriages. Like your marriage, your close marriage, this is going to have the biggest influence on your life. If your relationship, if your marriage is shit, your life is going to be shit. And it isn't until you break away from that marriage that your life can begin to improve. You can begin to form new relationships. So here at Genius Creators, what we're doing is we're putting forward this idea to you that if you want to create something new in your life, you have to get around people who are living in a way that is completely different to the way that you've been living up until now. And if you continue to associate and be around people who are living a life you don't want to live anymore, then you will find it very difficult to get out of that. There's a story about crabs in a bucket, okay? And this is something I've experienced in my life. They say that if you put a lot of crabs in a bucket and one crab tries to climb out of the bucket and get out of the bucket to freedom, the rest of the crabs will climb up and pull it back into the bucket. And this is what happens if you've gone through some kind of awakening process and you realize that you want something new in your life, you want something different, and you try to make that change. What you will find is that the people that surround you, your life partner, your parents, your friends, your family, your work colleagues will all tell you, no, you can't do that, you're crazy. What do you think? Who do you think you are? Trying to reach new heights, trying to do new things. And so here at Genius Creators, what we're doing is we're offering you a space. We're offering you a space where you can be the person, you can become the person that you want to become, surrounded by people who understand the rules of creation and how this actually works, and how you can begin to create the life that you desire, you can begin to get the body that you want, you can begin to get the mental clarity that you desire, you can find purpose, you can begin to utilize your own human life value to create vast amounts of monetary wealth. And so I invite you to continue along this story. And in the next video, I'm going to show you is I'm going to dive deep into this code, the connection code, which is the code we live by here in Genius Creators, that allows us to create lives that we love.